Hello and welcome to the Stoner Story Witch podcast. My name is Kristyn, and I am grateful to be recording and editing this podcast on the lands of the Chorotega people, colonially known as Costa Rica. So I wrapped up my season on Severance just 2 weeks ago, the last lunation. I try to release a podcast every full moon and new moon, which is a lunation. And shortly after I released that episode, 2 new episodes just were immediately begging to be made. And I did it. We pressed record on the Squid Game episode with my partner, Kevin. And I reached out to some fellow book fanatics on Reddit to do an episode on disability justice, indigenous sovereignty, and Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, the Empyrean series. And I'm just going to say that I think I might be transitioning away from a season structure where like season 1 was Little Women and season 2 is Severance and season 3 is going to have any sort of structure to it. I think I can still commit to lunations. And I mean, I actually released 2 episodes that had nothing to do with a full moon or a new moon. It was just because they were available and ready. And that means that my capacity for a story-themed podcast right now is low. I'm deep in digesting the latest season of Severance and other books and stories that I'm working on relating to and being in community around. So I think I'm in my official fuck around and find out season. And that's okay. I'm going to just release episodes as they come. And I really needed to remember this week that the purpose of the podcast is the process. And this morning, as I was thinking about what it is that I have ahead of me today and this week, and I saw that I had a meeting with my Embodied Social Justice cohort that I've been meeting with now for over 2 years. We met during a Rev Angel Embodied Social Justice course. You heard from, if you listened to season 2, episode 5 with John Klingler, it's the group that he and I are in. And these last few days, this last week has felt especially heavy with just lots of things, story related, real world related, personal life related. And I thought to myself, I didn't want to just record like a 10-minute little update like what I did for the solstice. I wanted to be held in some sort of community. And I reached out. I did a really hard thing and I made a request. And I just asked, would it be all right if I pressed record and offered it up in my podcast? It would just be like a little snippet of what I do and this community that I'm in. And it's to remind me that I'm not alone. I want to also just share some really like interesting, just feel kind of exciting and along the lines of the fuck around and find out. I also, within the last week, was featured on a friend's podcast called Asteria's Convos. I will link to it in the show notes. That was super fun to be in a conversation with someone around how do we build community for the future. And I invite everyone to check that out. Shortly after I recorded my episode on the Empyrean, that is the disability justice and indigenous sovereignty, I found myself in a situation where local people who have been working hard to fight gentrification and ecocide in my province. And there was an event that was going to happen, and I was really excited to be able to meet these people in person and do some community acts of resistance together. And I got sick. I was not able to go, and it felt really interesting to remember, very ripe in my mind, the conversations around when our bodies just cannot, when we just don't have the capacity to be able to do the things even that we really want to do that are most in alignment with my actions, that sometimes I still can't. And maybe even then the most radical thing and the most aligned thing that I can do is still honor the needs of my body, and to even though we live in these urgent times, we can always slow down. We can always take a pause, that like there is nothing so urgent that I need to be sacrificing like my wellness, potentially getting other people sick as well. Like certainly that's not what I'm here for. And so just really interesting to take a look back and reflect on these things that have happened. I also, the more I get involved in like just kind of the Reddit community around certain stories, the more I get sucked into like what it is to be collectively imagining better futures or future stories or fan fictions. And I have been kind of daydreaming about what it might look like to write my own sort of fairy tale fan fiction. And as I was really starting to kind of nurse these daydreams, I got an invitation to join a writers group, of all things. And it felt really scary and exciting to be invited into a community of writers right around the time that I'm just like daydreaming about the possibility. And I have all the reasons why I think that like I'm not a writer. I was a science teacher. And yet it brings me delight to just be in a practice of storytelling and not just making meanings from the stories that are already told, but what might it look like to challenge myself to write a bonus scene for a TV show or a movie, or a bonus chapter for a book that I really like. And so there's a lot of really creative ripeness here as well. I think that's all I'm going to say right now. I will just say that I'm really excited for this upcoming season to kind of just be seasonless and to just be labeling my episodes by number and just kind of follow the breadcrumbs as they fall. And I will just say that I feel like I am standing in a hallway of many doors, and each one of those doors is an invitation to collaboration or community or some deep conversation that I can have around the themes of the Stoner Story Witch. And I feel truly grateful that I have curated the community and created this hallway of possible conversations. And it's hard to commit to which doors I'm going to be walking through and when. But if you are someone that I have reached out to have a conversation, and I haven't gotten back to you yet, like I'm holding vigil at your doorway, and I'm thinking about like just when that moment is at its ripest, I will reach out. And if you've listened to to any podcast and you have resonance, you have thoughts, you have contributions, you want to just like reach out, I invite you as always to reach out to me at stonerstorywitch@gmail.com. I would be delighted to hear from you. I know people are listening, and it makes my day when I can hear from people to just know that that some part of something I've said has landed in some meaningful way. It really feels special to be connecting with people in that way. So thank you for joining. I also want to just warn your nervous system that in today's episode, I do release some tears. I cry with my Embodied Social Justice cohort, and I just want you to check in with yourself. Like, what are you in the midst of? What do you got on the docket for the rest of your day or the rest of your week? And I just want you to ask yourself, does the idea of listening to me cry feel like something that would be companioning you? Would it feel nice to kind of cry along with me in some way, to be just invited into potentially feeling some deep feelings? Or would you rather maybe take a pause and walk away? I don't believe that this episode requires any spoiler alert, because any stories that I mention or like their personal impact on me, I try to describe them archetypally and not using like specific character names or stories or anything. However, I do kind of talk in broad terms about the impact that stories are having on me. So you can just decide whether that is something that you want to perhaps risk feeling like something might have been spoiled for you. I don't know. I know people are really sensitive to spoilers, and just if you are one of them, take care of yourself. As always, let's take care of ourselves, folks. Well, thank you guys so much for agreeing to press record with me today. Just this morning, I was thinking I wanted to record a podcast for this week. The astrology is a really big one in the world and personally in my chart. And with this new moon and the timing, I was like, oh, I need to do that. And I also need to meet with this group. And then I got really excited at the idea of what if I could do both? And it felt really scary asking. And I recognize that that's been a really big theme of my life lately, with like in my marriage and in my little sourdough swap that I do. And it just feels really meaningful to have people that I can just practice being like, I'm going to make a request and you're allowed to say no, and I'm allowed to be disappointed. And that capitalism creates a lot of can't do's, and it's not always a won't do. It's not that people won't do it. So I'm already feeling really grateful that not only you guys can be here, but you will be here. So since I recorded my last podcast, the new season of Severance has come out, and I've been voraciously reading more romantasy books, which has been continued to be like a genre of story that is, at least at this phase in my life, resourcing me for liberation. And yeah, it just didn't feel right to do a whole story themed podcast this week. And I was just remembering that like the original download of the podcast is that the process is the purpose. And the purpose is not the product. That I'm not a podcast creator. That what I'm doing is I'm allowing like a podcast to be a technology that's responsible for like my own self-creation. And that like what I have is just a byproduct, right? Like what I want is to have this conversation, and I want to just invite people in. I won't spoil any of the stories that I'm currently into, but like what really is speaking to me is these like it's the story of the radical romantasy, where there is this protagonist that is confronted with this big lie, these like false binaries, people that the protagonist is conditioned to think as them and not us. A protagonist that often has like a positionality within that world that is harming others. And it's an invitation to join a revolution and to be visible. And there's so many stories. Like every book I read, it's the same story of like this radical revolution, and it just ignites this part of me that wants to invite that in here. Like if everybody is reading these books and consuming these stories, like can we not see these stories are invitations for us to like build community and connection with people, and to not be pointing fingers. And in one of the stories I was watching, there's someone who has an opportunity to use their power for a source of like share that they are in an up power position, and they're dishonest, and that it broke me a little to recognize how familiar that is. To not want to admit that I benefit from white body privilege in systems of white supremacy, that I benefit from having owning class resources within capitalist systems of exploitation. Since my last podcast, Trump was reelected, and I just feel motivated to be part of that revolution. Like, aside from political parties, but just through an embodied reaction to stories. What does it look like to build community through stories? To crowdsource fanfic that we collectively imagine liberation? To co-create the world we dream about from the one that we live in now? And I want it so bad. And I'm so grateful for you and this group, because a couple years ago, I opened up about these things and it was very uncomfortable. And through our practice, I've gotten more comfortable with myself and believing that I'm still worthy, that there's still a place for me in the revolution, that I'm not alone. And I'm fucking pissed off that I ever thought I was alone to begin with. That feels complete. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being with me.
What came to me, Kristyn, is you are the revolution. My goosebumps are back.
I'm noticing myself want to like push it away. But I believe the protagonist deserves to be a part of the revolution. And if I'm the protagonist in my story, can I just let a little bit of that? Like, thank you.
Also, what's with me is that this is the revolution. Like, I'm looking at us. I'm looking at us here.
Yeah.
And then having to tell myself, I can see me too.
How does that feel?
Well, I had to remind myself that, and I feel a bit like, oh, you know, a bit blushing or a bit like, oh, no, it's nothing, something like that. A bit smaller, a bit back away, and here we are together.
Yeah.
And I can see you all, and that makes me like, yeah, okay, I can believe that. I can believe this.
Yeah. I want to believe it too. Yeah.
Ask a question.
Certainly.
Yeah. Why is it important to you to be part of the revolution?
It's just like it's the only life worth having. None of the other stories are worth my time. It's the right thing to do. I think my spirit would die if I didn't, if I wasn't.
I don't know. I feel like sharing a couple things that are about from my own experience, but relate to things that you said. Do you feel up for that, Kristyn?
Absolutely.
Okay. Um, one part is there's something, in what you were saying that was echoed by several people today, this sense of feeling alone and
Yeah.
not really sure kind of where to click into that community or, kind of comradeship.
Yeah.
And, I've been feeling that in my own ways as well. So this is something that's evolved for me over the past couple of months, like a practice. When I'm doing centering now, like the Stossy style centering, the kind of thing that has started to the like refrain that I have come to repeat to myself is like it's like I'm held by the earth. I am the earth. I am held by the stars. I am the stars. And then wide. I'm held by ecosystem and community being like human social version of ecosystem. I am ecosystem and community. And then back, I'm held by my ancestors. I am an ancestor into my own body. I am held by my wounded, healing, strong, beautiful body. I am my body. I am held by the future. I am the future. I don't know. That's been really helping me with this thing. Like, there's actually no way to be alone. It's just not a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just about like whether you know it or not, or how much you know it in any given moment.
Right. How much you can like actually land it, like land that sense of
Yeah.
companionship.
Yeah.
Held by story, and I am a story.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. I'll leave the other piece. I have another thought about revolution, but I think we're out of time.
At time. Okay.
Yeah.
I had one more question. Um, do you feel like there's that you have to be accepted into the in group of revolutionaries?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's projection in my question.
Yeah. Yes.
because I know that in the moments when there's been moments, and there still are, where I'm feeling like I have to prove my worth,
Right.
and based on identity,
Mm-hmm.
it's like unconsciously there's this notion that I'm inherently unworthy
Mm-hmm.
to be a revolutionary, to
Mm-hmm.
use your language.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when I'm in those moments where I'm buying into that, then there's like a grasping for approval that happens for me, where it's like,
Yep.
I need to be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I guess the other side of that is like, can I be inherently worthy without needing to be acknowledged by any particular
Right.
group? This group that in this stage of my life, because it's going to change, I'm putting this certain group on a pedestal as like, these are the true revolutionaries. These are the people I want to be in community with.
Right.
And then I depend on I depend on their approval to accept me.
Mm-hmm.
But like, can I just feel that inherent worthiness and dignity without needing approval from anyone else? It's like, this is my way of being revolutionary based on
Mm-hmm.
who I am, where I've been, what my experience is. I don't need it to be defined by anyone else.
And like what my capacity is.
Yeah,
You know.
heck yeah.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the question and the projection behind the question.
Yeah. I think like cancel culture of like 5+ years ago like really did a number on like, okay, like, you know, how can I better not step my toe in that revolution unless I can guarantee that I am perfect, that I do it perfectly. And like we just obviously like all of the revolutionaries that I follow, like the queer, black, radical feminist, like they're all like, no, like we need you yesterday, flawed and all. And yeah, and it's still really scary. Hmm. I do know we're at time, so thank you guys for being with me. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to my Embodied Social Justice cohort for joining me and holding space for me. I want to thank Matt Schubbe for the podcast art, my husband Kevin Carlo for all his help in the creation of the theme song for the podcast, and Anais Mitchell and John Williams for their inspiration of Hedwig's theme and Hadestown. And before I sign off, I would like to leave you with a quote from another one of my teachers, Rev. Angel Kyoto Williams, who says, "Love and justice are not two. Without inner change, there can be no outer change. And without collective change, no change matters."